evening, everyone. My name is Steve Hernandez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Legislature's Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. I'm especially honored tonight to be hosting this conversation that we are calling an intimate conversation with Connecticut Black leaders about justice, access, and opportunity. I'm joined by three really of my mentors and of course the star of my profession, Richard Robinson, the Chief Justice of the State of Connecticut. I'm going to take a little bit of personal privilege, and I'm actually going to introduce you formally because I want to say a little bit about who you are and all of the wonderful just the leadership that you bring to Connecticut and to this profession. The Honorable Richard A. Robinson was born December 10, 1957 in Stamford, Connecticut, graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Connecticut and a Juris Doctor degree from West Virginia University School of Law. He was admitted to the West Virginia Bar and the Connecticut Bar and is a member of the U.S. District Court, Northern District of West Virginia, and the U.S. District Court of Connecticut. From 1985 to 1988, Justice Robinson was staff counsel for the City of Stamford Law Department. In '88, he became Assistant Corporation Counsel in Stamford, where he remained until his appointment as a judge of the Superior Court in 2000. He remained a Superior Court judge for the next 7 years, during which time he served as presiding judge for the New Britain Judicial District, presiding judge and assistant administrative judge for the Ansonia Milford Judicial District, and presiding judge for the Stamford Judicial District. He was appointed as a judge of the Connecticut Appellate Court on December 10, 2007, a justice of the Supreme Court on December 19, 2013, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court on May 3, 2018. But that's only the beginning. Justice Robinson's career is complemented by an array of public and judicial service, among that which is as president of the Stamford branch of the NAACP, general counsel of the Connecticut Conference of the NAACP, president to the Assistant Corporation Counsels Union, commissioner on the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, a sister agency of government, chair of the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights Opportunities. I could go on, and the reason I thought it was important to list some of the Chief Justice's not only accomplishments, but really contributions to the people of the state of Connecticut is because that is really the frame of today's conversation, and that is leadership in the Black community. And the critical moment that this moment is for leadership in this community. I also really want to welcome, again, three friends, colleagues, and really mentors in this work. Senator Gary Winfield, Representative Robin Porter, and Representative Pat Billy Miller. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
So I think aside from that, I'd like to dispense with everything else and just get right to our conversation. I'd like to start with you, Chief Justice Robinson. This is a heavy moment, not only in the history of Connecticut, but in the history of our world, and all of the history that we bring with us, as Robin often reminds us. Chief Justice Robinson, what does this moment mean to you?
This moment means so many things that it's actually hard to even talk about it. We've been through hard times, but not in my lifetime have we seen a situation where you have so many of these things going on nationally. You have COVID-19 going on. You have the protests going on. You have what's going on in Washington, D.C. There's so many things coming on that people are stressed out. People are worried. People feel a lack of leadership. People feel a lack of hope. These are all things that we can and we must address. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read it yesterday, but I sent out an email to the judicial branch employees on how I felt, and I've been surprised, but shouldn't have been surprised, how many people feel that way, how many letters I've received thanking me for taking a leadership role. And quite frankly, I'm just doing what the other folks here on this panel are doing. We're just making this up as we can and doing our jobs and making sure that these things that are so critical in society are actually addressed today.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Mhm.
Representative Miller, these are moments of leadership and they're moments of prayer. Tell me where you are today and where your heart has been in the last 3-4 months.
It's been difficult, and prior to this incident, I have to admit I was hopeless. I was hopeless. I was hopeless because of the leadership that we were getting from Washington. I was hopeless because of the police brutality that's been existing. And it just seems like no one cared. No one cared about the people of this country. And I'm not even going to say state, the people of this country. And I think that what has happened is given me the sense of hope, is that we have a crisis going on. And out of this crisis, there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to correct some wrongs that have been existed for hundreds of years. And so at this point, I'm full of hope. I'm full of hope if we do the right thing. If we don't use this opportunity to do what's right and to correct those wrongs, then I take issue with that. But I'm hopeful. I'm full of hope at this point.
Representative Miller talked about hope, but also doing the right thing. What's the right thing to your mind?
The right thing is, like she said, eradicating the wrongs and doing the things that we know need to be done. I think it's really frustrating, some of the things that we are seeing and some of the excuses that are being given. We talk about due process. We saw George Floyd assassinated on live TV, live feed, someone recorded it. And to be told that, an officer accidentally killed a criminal is an insult, a further insult to injury. So I just think that, we need to do what's right. We know what we need to do. We have police officers that have the most power, right? Ultimate power. They have the right to take life. And to whom much is given, much is required. And I think that, we hold everyone to a standard. We understand that we get held to a higher standard as being leaders and elected officials. So my thing is, if you are a police officer with ultimate power, then you should be held to a higher standard because you've taken a vow, you've taken an oath to serve and protect and to obey the law. So if you are committing crimes, we need to press charges. We need to convict. People need to go to jail, and they need to go for a very long time. Their time sentences can't be the same as an everyday citizen that commits a crime. And that's just how I feel about it. We know what we need to do, and we need to make sure that we're holding people in high authority, into a higher level of accountability and transparency.
Thank you, Representative. I hear hope, I hear accountability. Senator Winfield, why is it important that leaders look to Black leaders in this moment in our history here in the state of Connecticut?
That's an interesting question. We have, you and I, Stephen, have engaged in these conversations for the last few weeks, trying to delve a little deeper than some of the other conversations we've had. And I think it's been important conversation. We've had important conversations that reveal these situations in ways that almost none of the other conversations that I've been a part of have revealed them. And I think Black people are connected to this situation, whether it be COVID-19, whether it be police brutality that is too much a real thing in our communities. The year that I started my activism was 1 year post Rodney King. That's a long time, right? And we talk about how in this moment we now see things that we never saw before, but that's not accurate. We've been seeing this for 30 plus years. And it was happening before that, but we've been seeing it for 30 plus years. And so I think it's important to have the people who understand these problems intimately speaking in this moment, leading in this moment. And that's why, for me, I'm happy to be on this panel, but what I'm really happy to see is the leadership of our youth and the women in our communities, because they have always really led us forward. If you think about the civil rights movement proper, and you think about any advancements we've had in this arena, it has always been through the leadership of the women and the young people to lead us forward.
Chief Justice, you're at the helm of what is probably one of the most powerful institutions in the state, which is at the helm of the administration of justice, but also a profession and a professional group that looks to you. I think that your words yesterday were powerful. Were you speaking to the profession directly, and really what did you want to communicate directly to professionals in the law? If you could just unmute, Chief Justice.
Yes, I was speaking to the professionals, and the reason why I was is because sometimes I give a speech about the difference between lawyers and attorneys, and an attorney is a person who goes in there and represents an individual. A lawyer is a person who has a duty to the profession and duty to the people. It's bigger than that duty to your individual client. The people in judicial, by far, I find that whether they're lawyers, judges, lay people, they really care about the work. They care deeply about the work. The people of color there not only care about the work, they're affected by the work. Their family's affected by the work. They know somebody who's involved with the system. They know all these things, so they care very, very deeply. The problem is that you get to a point where you just get tired. I mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer in that email. Fannie Lou Hamer once said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." And so the thing is, what do you do when you get to that point? You either quit or you push ahead. I saw too many people with their heads down, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go, feeling despair. And it's like, this is a moment where we need to just, pick ourselves up, because either you quit or you succeed. Those are the only two options. Quitting is not an option. It really isn't. We have to succeed. Dr. King had a dream, and that dream has been deferred. So do we just give up and say that dream can never occur? Or do we get up there and we make that dream happen? The thing that I'm seeing that's different about what's going on today is people are getting active, and it's not stopping. After a lot of other incidents in the past, people got excited, they protested, they marched, they did things, and then a couple of weeks later, we were back to normal. That's not happening this time. There's something different about this. And that's why leaders need to seize on this and take that energy and focus it and make sure that we have real change, make sure that we achieve real equal justice for all.
Thank you. For as long as I've worked with each of you in the legislature, we know how interconnected all of these issues are, and how the impacts on communities of color, especially African-American community, and also African-American boys, really come from different places, whether it's pathways to discipline, whether it's missed opportunities in reading by third grade, whether it's the inability to earn a living wage for our families. All of these things are interconnected. Representative Miller, one of your hallmark pieces of work throughout the last few years that we've worked together is early literacy. Why is early literacy important to you in lifting up our community?
Douglass said that knowledge is the pathway from slavery to freedom. If you're not educated, you're in bondage. You can't be successful. And so when I first started this work with Senator Winfield, who was Representative Winfield at the time, we learned that from K to 3, you're learning to read. From that point on, you're reading to learn. And so if you don't know how to read by 4th grade, how can you learn throughout your career? And so I know that coming from the segregated South, I know how important it is to have an education. I learned when I came to integrated North that they really didn't care about me having an education. And I had to fight from the time I came to Stanford until I left Stanford in 9th grade. And because someone gave me the opportunity to lead the Stanford public school system, I was able to succeed. I had my 8th grade teacher called me when I was in my 30s, and she said something to me, because I'll be honest with you, I was very angry because of the way that I was treated. She said something to me that resonated. She says, Pat, they didn't do right by you. And that's the way I feel about the students of this state. We're not doing right by them. We're not giving them the opportunity to succeed. And we have a responsibility to make sure that every child knows how to read by the time they leave the school system. And so that's why the work is so important to me, because these kids don't have a chance if they don't know how to read.
Thank you. Bob and Representative Porter, our families, to Representative Miller's point, it starts when our children are kids, but it goes on into the family life and it presents itself later in life. Our families are chronically stuck in cycles of poverty. Can you speak to your efforts? First of all, why are our families stuck in cycles of poverty? And what can we do in order to support our families to lift themselves out of that poverty with the level of industry that we know they're putting into their poverty, but just can't catch a break?
Well, I think we see poverty as we do, especially in Black and Brown communities, at the rate we do, because of the structural inequalities, right? The systemic racism, the way the system has evolved, has lended a very heavy hand in what we see when it comes to poverty. We have criminalized poverty. We have criminalized childhood behavior. We have created a system that actually, some like to coin school to prison pipeline. I call it a crib to coffin pipeline, because we are birthed into it and we die in it. And many are continuing to struggle generation to generation just to see their way out of it. And it's like Representative Miller said. I mean, if you're not educated, what can you achieve? If you cannot read, what can you achieve? I mean, you have to have comprehension, and it comes from learning to read. That's the fundamentals. If we're not given the fundamentals, we know what the data says. By 3rd grade, you're on your way to prison. And these children are coming out of single parent homes. We talk about a livable, sustainable wage. We just raised the minimum wage to 15 by 2023. Still not enough, but it's getting people further along, but not where they need to be, not where they could be, especially when we look at how we've allowed, this system of capitalism to evolve and take over, and how we have millionaires and billionaires in this state, but yet we have the widest wealth gap. You have a very small percentage of people that are wealthy, not well off, not comfortable, wealthy and ultra wealthy, and then you have the majority that are either working poor or middle class, which is really disappearing. So, I mean, there's many reasons, but I think that, if we look at it in a nutshell and you want to boil it down, it is the system that people like to say is broken. And I don't think it's broke. I think it needs to be broke. And I think that we need to rebuild it in a fashion that is rooted and grounded in equity, because there's no equity in the system. And this is why poverty has been able to persist in our communities.
I always love the way that you frame this as this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We don't need to have poor people in order to have rich people. And just the notion that there isn't enough to go around is something that I think each of you has battled. Senator Winfield, the interconnectedness to all of this, and ultimately how it is that justice policy is both informed and informs opportunity. One thing that I've seen, and I think for watching you work in the last few years, Senator, I think for you that there are a lot of no-brainers in this work. There are things I think that if you could wave a wand would happen today in terms of the policy of justice and meting out justice in the state. What, to your mind, is the biggest impediment? We see coalitions of well-meaning policymakers come together around these issues publicly, but then they seem to almost dissolve at the moment of truth. What, to your mind, is the biggest impediment to making good policy and meaningful policy change at your level?
I think part of it is that people simply refuse to wake up. They like the American dream, and I don't mean the white picket fence. They like thinking that America is something that it isn't. And when it comes to waking up, recognizing that the foundations of this system are watered with the blood of human beings, that racism and white supremacy are at the foundation. So everything that grows out of the foundation is poisoned by that. People are not wanting to do that. And so even some of our allies, or as they call themselves allies, are not allies in the way that we need them to be allies, right? They deem themselves allies, but when you're an ally, it is the person that you are helping that gets to give you that title. You don't just take that title for yourself. When you take that title for yourself, you begin to believe that you have a certain agency that you shouldn't have as an ally, and you operate in ways that aren't really as productive for the people you say you are helping as it should be. I think that I'll give you an example of where my frustrations come in, because I know that watching the death, the murder, the assassination of George Floyd on TV has activated people. I get that. And we're seeing people activated who aren't always activated. But when Representative Miller talked about the work we did together a lot of years ago, 10, 11 years ago, we created the K-3 reading program. We've seen no program that had the success. And then we went back and we made sure we got the data so that they couldn't say it wasn't successful. We've seen nothing like that. And to this day, the money has still never been put into that program. A program that worked in districts where they told you couldn't close the achievement gap in the way that we did. We have evidence of it. It's not me saying it. It's not me hoping it. There's no supposition. There is evidence collected by people who had no interest in making sure that we were able to come out and say this. And when we went to the legislature to get the money, some of the people who today stand with us and say Black Lives Matter weren't there for giving us the money. And so I guess I look at what people are saying and I look at the actions they have and I say, your actions don't say Black Lives Matter. You weren't here with us when we tried to do police accountability before, when we tried to do housing, to deal with housing issues. People voted for that bill on 830G that meant that Black people and people of color couldn't move into certain communities. That's in Connecticut, not circa 1947, not circa 1968, 2015 plus, today. So why would anyone believe, despite what they're seeing on TV today, why would anyone believe that it's different? Because the actions, and I'm talking the long-term actions of the people in this state, in this blue state today, are the same actions that we have always seen. And they're not the actions of people who believe Black Lives Matter now. I am happy to be proven wrong. But to this point, I have not been. And that's why I'm tired and frustrated, because it's easy to say Black Lives Matter in this moment. But as I said, I've been an activist for 28 of my 46 years. Are we prepared, the people who are speaking today, are we prepared to do that? Because this work will not be finished because we get a police accountability bill. Will not be finished because even if we got that money funded for the K-3 reading program, this is long-term work. Are we prepared to do long-term work where there is no glory for it, where sometimes you're vilified for it, called a racist for pointing out the fact that racism is part of the foundation of what we do? I don't know that the answer to that is yes. That's why I think we have the issues that we have.
Thank you, Senator. Chief Justice, as an attorney and throughout my experience in really trying to live up to the values of this profession, I learned early on that these foundational documents that were part of the founding of this nation, not the least of which is the Constitution, which we are all sworn to uphold. These foundational documents were an expression of pen to promise that were powerful even in their time and continue to be today. But the level of human ingenuity that it took to take those documents and then create an entire society, and in some ways perpetuate a society that flew directly in the face of what those documents said and continue to say. That took doing. That took a lot of work. And to my mind, it's always seemed as if the only way that we're actually going to live up to the promise of the founding is to undo so much of what we've done since then. To your mind, Chief Justice, what is the role of our profession in the undoing of those infrastructures that we have so carefully built over the last couple hundred years?
That's a very complicated answer for somebody in my position, because the rule of law is basically built on stare decisis. What we do is built on law that has already been formed, and the changes are incremental. A lot of what needs to be done isn't in my building, but it's in the building across the street, because I don't have those kinds of powers. However, when I'm off the bench, I do have more power, even though the canons restrict what I can say. And a lot of people don't understand that. I can't get into the political discourse. I can, however, talk about how the rule of law can be affected, how we can operate within those narrow confines and make change. The doctrines that you talked about, those pieces of paper, the men who created those weren't perfect. They were imperfect, very imperfect. But the ideals have grown. The ideals were originally for white property owning males. That's who the Constitution really protected. Since that time, they've been expanded, but they weren't expanded just because somebody else over there wanted to be nice. They were expanded because people got out there and forced them to give them, not give them, they took those rights. They worked for those rights. They worked very hard for those rights. So there's a lot of things that can be done and need to be done outside my building. And I need people to understand that, because my role is limited. One of the hardest things for me to do was to become a judge and make that transition. You know, I was the activist. I was general counsel for the NAACP. I was all these things. And then I decided that I needed to get inside and work on the inside too, because the judiciary didn't look like me. The judiciary didn't think like me. But now that I'm on the inside and that I can make people understand things in ways they couldn't understand, I can explain what it's like in the inner city. I grew up not that far from where the Billy family grew up, literally blocks away. And life wasn't that easy. We didn't realize when we were young, but it wasn't that easy. Things are pretty tough. I've had some very negative experiences with police, for example. And those impacted upon me. And I can tell my fellow jurists when we're sitting down talking about cases, hey, look, here's what's happening out there besides what the law says. Here's how this makes people feel. Here's what I think we need to do and what direction we need to go in. And maybe we need to just be a little less stringent in sticking exactly to what the old case law says, because these facts are different. We know that those old cases were built on facts that weren't complete. They didn't have a different point of view. Now you have that different point of view. Where are we going to go with this?
Thank you so much. And in terms of where we go with it, Representative Porter, you have stood, I can't think of a more powerful moment in the last couple of years, I should say, because as I said, each of you has been a mentor to me. One of the original ones, Pat Miller and Gary, and then Robin, you and I got to know each other. But I can't think of one of the most inspirational moments that I saw was you standing in that chamber for hours on end, hours, talking about the importance not only of breaking intergenerational cycles of poverty, but doing it in a way that is thoughtful and believes in our family. Some of that incremental change in narrative of how it is that we see our family. Tell me, what is the potential that you see in our people of color, especially our Black families in the state of Connecticut?
The potential for what, Stephen?
For our people, for people of color, particularly Black families in the state of Connecticut, what is the potential that you see?
Oh, the potential is endless, given the equity piece. You know, if we had, people say there's an achievement gap. I disagree. There's an opportunity and resource gap. That is what exists. So the potential There is no limit to our potential. I think we've proven that. If we were ever taught our history, those of us that know us understand that we were kings and queens. We were mathematicians, we were scientists, astrologers, doctors, lawyers. We built a continent. I mean, we built a world as we know it now, and we built this country on our back. So when you talk about potential, potential is endless, but potential doesn't mean anything unless you have the tools you need in order to succeed. So that is where we have dropped the ball on this. And I just think it's really unfortunate because, Chief Justice was saying that, that happened because they took it by force. This is where we are. I believe that is the moment we're in. A lot of people have been saying as I've been out, rallies, protests, and speaking at different events. And I've heard people say, power concedes nothing without a demand. Well, I'm here to tell you, we've been making demands for centuries and ain't got much of nothing. So now it's time to take it by force. And when I got to the building, I started to really understand how this political game worked. Initially, I felt that I wasn't qualified to be in the building. And what God had to show me was your life experience qualifies you. It's not what you learn in this building. It is what you bring to this building. It is because I am one of those folks that have been and continues to be closest to the problems. Therefore, it makes me closest to the solutions. And even though I'm close to power, there's still, inequities in that because I don't have the same power that my white counterparts have. And it's really funny now we're being pushed to this crossroad. And my thing is, it's time to stop talking because I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. Like Senator Winfield said, these are the same people a couple of years ago that, wanted nothing to do with these issues and everything that they did said Black lives didn't matter. So if you want to come back, I'm one to go there with you, but you got to come for real because at this point, Steve, my people can't afford to take no prisoners. The way they're killing us, the injustices, and it's not just the police brutality. It is the education. It is the health disparities. Let's talk about COVID. The way that is killing us. How ironic that it takes our breath. It destroys the lungs. I can't breathe. That's how you die. And then we're dealing with a police brutality instance where we are literally having the life, the breath snuffed out of us by the very ones that are supposed to serve and protect us.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Miller, I want to ask you the same question because you and I have had a lot of conversations about where people didn't see that potential in you, you saw it in yourself. Why do you fight so hard for our kids and for their future? What potential do you see in our black children especially?
Our children have always had potential. It's like me. I have potential. My daughter had potential. But again, it goes back to what we were saying, the opportunity. We were never given the opportunity. And quite frankly, there are people that didn't care about our potential. And so I think that for me, that we have to, there's no playing like Robin stated. It's time to stop talking. As Gary said, the same people that say Black Lives Matter now, these are the people that have been stopping our work. These are the people that when we first started this work and we wanted to implement the program in schools, the initiative in schools, they gave us 5 schools and 5 districts. Now it's grown to 70 schools and 17 districts. And so it's for me, it's about people putting their money where their mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is. And I'll be honest with you, Steve, I just learned something recently. I learned that, I've heard since I've been in Hartford, I heard about Prudence Crandall, right? Mm-hmm. I see this woman with this little girl in the Capitol. I see a monument. And so I learned that the Connecticut General Assembly outlawed her school that educated Black girls. They outlawed the school. And it was Mark Twain 5 years later that had it repealed. We're doing the same thing. We are making sure that our children of color are not being educated. They're at the lowest part of the totem pole, and we're not educating them. That we've proven that our program works. The data is there. The initiative works. And, we started out a couple of years ago, we had a budget of $2.8 million. Today, we have a budget of $1.6 million. 5 schools down to up to 70 schools. And we have less money. What does that say, Steve? What does it say about this state? It means that, we do what we want to do, right? Here we have kids, we have a program, an initiative that works, is research-based, it works, the data is there, but we still don't want to put our money where our mouth is. How are we going to survive? You need skilled workers. And so as far as I'm concerned, I'm with Robin. You're not going to give it to me. I want to take it. I'm tired of talking. I am so tired of talking. I've been talking for 11 years. I've been begging for 11 years. Steve, we literally have to beg for the things that we want for the people of color, for the people that don't have a voice. We have to beg. We have to negotiate. No, you can't have this. We give you 5. No, if that is over. Martin Luther King, what did he say about riots? Riots is the language of the unheard. That's why people are rioting, because no one's listening to them. No one's paying attention to them. And it's time for us to stop. It's time for us to stop. It's time for them to make sure that these children are successful and have the opportunity. And guess what I learned? Even if you have a middle-class parent and you're a child of color, they still don't care about you. They still don't care about you. So I think that we as legislators have a responsibility to not just one child, not just the white student, but to all students, whether they're Black, brown, whatever color they are, we have a responsibility to all students. And so I'm here, Steve. After George Floyd, I can't anymore. I can't talk anymore. I really cannot talk anymore. And so it's about demands, and the individuals with the power, it's time for them to do what they need to do the right thing. It's not even what they need to do what is right. The equity. So I'm sorry if I'm so emotional, but I'm just at the point where I've just had it up to here.
Senator Winfield, I hear Representative Miller's energy, her passion for her people. It's a passion that I've often seen you evoke with your colleagues, not only in the House, but in the Senate as well, to be able to communicate not only the urgency, but in some ways, the utter desperation of doing the right thing. So let's talk about allies. Let's talk about your allies. Tell me what it's like to work in your building, in the legislature, in our building, with allies, and what you would ask of allies moving forward.
Get behind me. Simple ask, get behind me. We don't need people to tell us how to get there. We don't need people to lead on our issues. We can do that. And one of the things that I have made as part of my mission since I got to the building was to remind us of that. Whether it be in the way that I've operated as a legislator, the time when I was the head of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, or in anything that I do, I want to remind us that we are fully capable of leading, and it should be part of our mission to take power, to look at the positions of power. And I'm not talking about the titles that we get, deputy this, deputy that. I'm talking about real positions of power in that building. And have our allies follow behind our lead on our issues, which is why, and I've been transparent about this, part of my mission was to get to the place where I am right now, where we've never had a non-attorney as the head of the Judiciary Committee, because that's important. You come with a different perspective. And for a Black person to pull that off, I think was important for people to see, because when people tell me, this can't be done and that can't be done, I look back and I say, oh, yes, it can. And I'm not just saying that. The work that I'm doing is showing you that that's possible. I think that it is beyond time. The state of Connecticut had a Black person at the head of the Senate, a Black person at the head of the House. Why hasn't that happened, right? And so my mission is, yes, to look to the allies and say, get behind me on this issue. This ain't your issue, right? Not to lead on, at least. This is my issue. Get behind me. I'll get behind you on your issues. I always do, right? But this is your turn to stand there and go, when I lead. This is your turn to stand there and go, when Robin leads, or when Pat leads, or when a number of other colleagues are leading. This is how we can be real allies. Look, if our politics aren't as intersectional as the lives we live, then there's something wrong with our politics. And that means that there are moments when a man must stand behind a woman as she leads. There are moments when a Black person should stand behind a white person behind a Black person. But the way that it happens is white males stand in front of everybody. right? And so what I'm saying to people, if you really want to be an ally on this issue, trust us. We're listening to our community. We're listening to those young people who have galvanized this country right now, and the women who have galvanized this country and led them to the halls of what should be justice, have led them to their city halls, have led them out there on those streets. And we know what we need to do. So listen.
Chief Justice, thank you, Senator. Chief Justice, I've been so proud of our profession, not only in response to the injustices that we're seeing committed against Black people in this country, but also in response to the disparate impact that COVID-19 is having on our communities, especially communities of color. Over the last few months, attorneys have started committees where they are providing free legal advice, focusing on people of color, small businesses of color. I've seen them turn their efforts to providing help to seniors of modest means, giving help and using their skills in order to help. What do you say as the leader in our profession, what do you say to attorneys who want to be our allies and who want to use their skills and their skill set to give to this community and help lift up this community as we go through some of our toughest times?
Well, the first thing they have to do is don't wait for somebody else to do it. We love sitting in one place and hoping that things will happen. As an attorney, you have an obligation to go out there and better society. There's a Shakespeare play involving a character called Dick the Butcher. And he utters this line that I'm sure you've all heard is, first we kill all the lawyers. And people think that line is about killing lawyers because he doesn't like lawyers. The reason why Dick the Butcher wanted to kill all the lawyers is because he was part of this revolution. And in order to bring society down, you kill the lawyers. So that shows you how important that role is. And people also don't realize that one person can make a difference. But think about 1,000 people being one person and 1,000,000 people being one. So what you do can actually make change. And I'm going to digress on this because it was something that Representative Billy Miller said. The thing is, don't do it because it's the right thing to do it. Do it because it actually will make your life better. It will make society better. Think about this. When you're talking about those children who aren't getting a proper education, each time you don't train a mind, you lose a possibility. What would have happened if this little Black kid 27 years ago had gotten an education, gone to med school, saw how COVID-19 looked, and said, hey, I know a solution to that. I know how to stop this virus. You've lost that chance. Each time you don't help that mind get trained, you lose another possibility. So don't do it for that child. Do it for society. Do it for yourself, because there's big returns on that. And I think people have to start thinking in an entirely different way. You know, I'm not a socialist, but I realize the power of people together. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have roads, we wouldn't have hospitals, we wouldn't have doctors, we wouldn't have lawyers, we wouldn't have any of those things. So what people need to do is understand that we need to lift everyone up in order to expand our possibilities. And lawyers are part of that.
Chief Justice, just recently, one of our own, Attorney Goldsby, of the Crawford Bar, former past president of the Crawford Bar, was attacked for her bravery, really, in speaking the truth to power, because of what we're seeing now, the injustices committed. And part of the attack was to label her inauthentic and to label her a product of privilege. And the response of the affinity bars, including the Hispanic Bar Association and Crawford Bar, were to wrap ourselves around her and to tell her, we've got your back. So in terms of allyship, why is it important that we as attorneys have each other's back when we are attacked, especially attorneys of color, where we're attacked as imposters or as the beneficiaries of privilege? And also secondary, the second question, why is it so important that we have more Black and brown attorneys at the bar?
Okay. Let me give you a personal experience as a good reason. When I got on the bench, there weren't many attorneys of color on the bench. There were a handful. When I got assigned to New Haven, one of the first people who came to my chamber was Luby Harper. Now, I don't know if you know Justice Harper, but Justice Harper is an amazing person. And the first thing he said to me was, Rick, you're going to be all right because I want to make sure you're going to be all right. That kind of companionship, that kind of support is very, very necessary. You talked about the situation with Attorney Goldsby. I know Attorney Goldsby. She's an amazing person and very powerful, and she's going to, she's going to change the world. She is. If you want to talk about the positive and negative speech, I think we have the better argument. I think we will win that in the marketplace. And the thing about Attorney Goldsby, she can hold her own. She could use the support, but she can hold her own. And so her speech versus any other speech out there, I think that she has the better speech on this area. So, but you can't do it alone. You get tired of fighting. You get tired of the cultural problems that we have in this country, in the state, in the city, where people pretend they aren't there. You kind of get tired of being gaslighted, and I don't know if you're familiar with that expression, but it's, hey, no, that didn't happen. No, there isn't racism. No, there isn't discrimination. No, there isn't implicit bias. When I've gone out there and done these implicit bias trainings, one of the first things I try to do is get people to understand that it's all over the place. You do it, I do it, everybody does it. The question is it influencing your decisions without you knowing it? Now, there's implicit bias and there's downright racism. They both exist. So the thing is, we all have to do something about that. I think affinity bars are very, very important. Some people are totally against them. I think that's crazy, because they do provide that support in ways that other people cannot provide.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I've been thinking in the past few weeks and months, just by virtue of the position that I hold as the head of this commission, I've been approached by people from all over the state of Connecticut, people who identify as white. And for the most part, there's been a level of absolute humility, a desire to be an ally, with some even a real opening up about not knowing how to be an ally. What can I do? How can I help? What can I say? Should I just step back and be quiet? I want to ask each of you, starting with Gary, with Senator Winfield, what do you say to the people who are demonstrating on behalf of Black Lives Matter, the young people in some of our suburban and rural areas, white children who are coming out to support people of color and Black people specifically? What do you say to them in this moment where we need our allies, we want our allies, but we also want to express a level of humility in the sight of the enormity of this task?
Well, I mean, I say what I said in the last time I just spoke on this panel. I talk about what it is to be an ally and what that means. Because I think too many people have a desire to be an ally, but they don't really understand what that means. And so they think that means that, I come in and then I begin doing the work I think is necessary to help you. And that's not the way to be an ally. In the years I've been active, I've worked on a lot of issues. And I've never come into places where I was working with women on their issues and said, well, here's how you need my help. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I didn't go when I was doing work with some people in the disabilities community and tell, I don't understand your experience. I know that all of us could use allies, and so I show up. And the first thing I say is, what do you need me to do? Right? That's the first thing I say, because I understand that I don't know. The only reason I showed up is because I recognize that your condition is not what it should be. And so that's what I say to them. And I say to them, back to what I said at the beginning, waking up is hard to do. And there are going to be things said that are going to feel like they're an attack on you. And that's going to happen because we've connected ourselves to our history. And if you've connected yourself to your history and your identity is wrapped up in that, and someone challenges that history, it's a challenge to your identity. And I've said to them, you have to understand that just because it feels like it's an attack on you, take a step back and figure out whether or not what you're hearing is really a reframing of the history of this country. It's a reframing of the way that things are understood. And then go and investigate what you heard before you allow your emotion to take over your mind. Because what you may discover is that everything that you always knew wasn't true. Richard Wright wrote a novel, Invisible Man, right? And in that novel, he talked about the way that we're invisible. And that's not that they don't actually see us, but because of how they choose to see us, they don't see us. And that causes points of friction. And even when they begin to try to see us, it is difficult because they're still looking with untrained eyes. And so while your eyes are being trained to see anew, there are going to be points at which what you see seems to be unbelievable. There are going to be points at which what you hear seems to be wrong. But the thing that you have to know is that it may not be as unbelievable as it looks, and it may not be as wrong as it sounds. And that's part of becoming an ally.
Thank you for that. You know, I love your point about refuting the dominant narrative of history does not necessarily mean refuting the ideals I think that we're all working for. So I really appreciate that. Representative Miller, I want to ask you the same thing. You know, especially in the spaces that you and I have worked together, we have benefited from allies in this work. What do you say to people who come to you with an open mind and an open heart to really want to be part of the solution?
What I've said to people is, number one, when you see something, do something. It's not enough to say something, do something. We need individuals that are going to work. And as Gary has stated, you know, stand behind me. It was funny, we did a caravan to support mothers who have lost their children to police brutality on Sunday. And a white woman came up to me and says, I'm white, but what can I do for you? I said, you know, you could go places I can't go. And so in that venue, you can speak up for what's right and you can do what's right. And so we go back to this, and I think that we all agree. It's almost, I have felt invisible, Gary. As a legislator, I've been made to feel invisible. When I first got elected, I was never acknowledged with my delegation. And so with my allies, I want to say to you, see me, see that we exist. Understand, as Gary stated earlier, that this is our community. This is our culture. We know what's right for our people. So work with me. Don't try to take over. And that's the experience that I've had is someone's always telling me what's good for my people. And that's why I experience, and you know, when we work on a issue in the General Assembly and individuals tell us, well, no, we're going to give you this instead of that. They're telling us, we know what's best for your community. We know what's best for you. So for my allies, trust me and respect me and see me. So that's what I would tell my allies.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Representative Porter, I asked the same thing of you. I know that in the work that we've done together, this is work that has to break down barriers, and oftentimes we reach across. We have unlikely partners in this work. What would you say to our allies or people who want to open-heartedly be part of the solution?
I think the first thing that I would say to them, I mean, because what Senator Winfield and Representative Miller has said is true, and I agree with all of that. What I would add to that is close your eyes and imagine. I spoke to a good friend of mine who is an ally, white woman, do a lot of work for her at the legislature. And she's really been making an honest to God effort to understand. And we were talking yesterday morning, and we went into that conversation around, how I felt about how things were evolving. And we were actually on the subject of, this whole idea of people kneeling today, right? There was a purpose for that, and there was a meaning for that, but that's not today. So the conversation I was having with her was, I don't need my allies on their knees. I need them to get up and stand with me, get up and do something. And what do we do? Tell me what we need to do. I said, well, what I want you to do in this moment is I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine that George Floyd was your husband, because I know the relationship that her and her husband have. Not all couples have it. Beautiful relationship, deep rooted love. Imagine. And she was like, whoa. I said, so what would you do with the power and the privilege that you have if that was your husband and you witnessed that happen to him? And I understand for a lot of allies that is hard, because first of all, realistically, it would be the exception, not the rule. For us, it's the opposite. It's the rule, not the exception. We are guaranteed to have these kind of altercations at different levels, not necessarily ending in death. But I think we all have a story when it comes to police brutality or just police disrespect, just the way that they talk to us and treat us, without even having to put their hands on us. And I think the thing that I would tell the young people, because I got to give New Haven props. Sunday they brought out 5,000 people, the youth, New Haven Youth-Wide Coalition did that, 5,000 people. And it is what God has been showing me for a very long time. It is the Joshua generation. It is the young people that are going to lead this. And I say this to white, Black, Asian, brown, all these young people. You guys are so far removed from what we grew up, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents were much closer to this thing. And it's been hitting very well. But now the veil is off. And because they're seeing it up close and personal in a way that we haven't they haven't had to see it before, they're going to do things that I think are going to shock a lot of people. I actually saw a young lady with a sign at one of the protests, and she said, and I'm ad-libbing, but don't get it twisted. I'm not my ancestors. I will F you up. So this is their, and we don't want the violence, but it's just what that said to me was, enough is enough, and we ain't taking it no more. So I think also in telling them to lead and be there, they need to put their bodies on the line, and they were asked to do that at the protest. And they did that. White people went to the front and stood between Black and brown folks and the police when they got to headquarters. They did that. I remember we were marching and it was hot, and the speakers were thirsty and it was humid. And one of them said, hey, where are my white allies? We need some water. And by the time we got to City Hall, we had white women coming back. And I don't know where they went to, but they came back with cases of water in their hands to give out to the people that were out there protesting. And it was done with humility. And when I saw that, that increased my hope. I hadn't lost hope, but it was getting real, real glim for me. And the thing that gives me hope, Stephen, is watching these young people walk into their calling and watching white people put their bodies on the line and really do something. Because what we say, I'm believing you now because I'm seeing what you're doing. And it's just, it's one thing, like Senator Winfield said, for people to feel like they're under attack. And I just want to address that. But my thing is this, we are literally under attack. So spare me your feelings and get with us in this program, get with us in this movement and help us to do the things that need to be done yesterday. I am not in agreement with anything incremental. My people are not being killed in these streets incrementally. There needs to be action. It needs to be swift. It needs to be effective. It needs to be meaningful. I am not sugarcoating. We don't want no crumbs. They say if you ain't at the table, you're on the menu. I'm at the table and I'm still the main course. It's time for that to change. So I want the young people, especially our white allies, the young people, to know that they are so much appreciated and that they are so much a part of this movement, and they will help to make the difference and to make it happen this time. We must make it happen this time. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all or nothing. You can't keep doing the same things you've been doing, expecting a different result. So I'm not coming back to that building to negotiate and compromise and sit to the table with this bipartisan talk we like to do. Ain't nothing. This should not be a partisan issue. This is a humanitarian issue. This is about Black people and brown people being assassinated for centuries in this country, totally being treated like trash, like we're disposable. And we're seeing this with COVID and the essential workers and the workers that have kept this state open for the last 3 months are the very same workers that I had to debate a bill for 14 hours on the House floor for, because they didn't feel like they deserved that. And now we're asking them to put their lives and their family lives and their communities' lives on the line as they go out to work without proper PPE. And that's a whole nother segment we could talk about.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Porter. You know, Chief Justice, one thing that I am a champion of this profession, and wherever I go, especially when I'm talking to young people of color, I truly believe that we need to expand this profession with young people that look like us, but that bring a diversity of thought, a diversity of ability, and really a diversity of promise. If you were standing before a group of young people, and I'm going to focus on Black and brown people, what do you say to them to bring them into the fold of this profession and to be the attorneys that you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that uphold the values of our profession?
Well, excuse me. One of the mistakes I think we've been making is we start looking at people in college and saying, you should start thinking about being a lawyer. That's too late. We should do it much earlier, back to those kids who are just beginning to learn, those kids who are just beginning to read. We need to really build effective pipelines. It's tragic that we wait so late. I'm trying to, and I've met some excellent people. There's a former police officer, Vincent O'Banner, who I grew up, he's from the village. I grew up with Vinny O'Banner, and he often calls me to go into various places in Stamford and Bridgeport and New Haven to go and meet young people. And I keep telling him, you know, it's great, but let's make sure we get to younger people. So we start out working with people 16, 17, 18 years old, I guess. The last one I did was at the elementary school in Stratford. So that's when you need to really start getting the people to really talk about what their lives can be. One of the biggest problems with racism is you look at a young Black child and you see that sparkle in their eyes. You see that desire to learn when they're very young. By the time they're in sixth grade, you start seeing that those eyes have dulled. We can't let that happen. We need to start early, whether you're a legislator, a lawyer, a doctor, a sanitation worker. You need to go back to the kids when they're really young and start to show them that you can do this. You can be successful. If I had to say the thing that helped me the most in my entire career, and I mean my entire career, was my fourth grade teacher, Janet Harris, Stevens School. Janet Harris told me, you are the cream of the crop. She told her class, you are the cream of the crop. You can do anything you want to do. And she never let us forget that. Every single day she told us that we were the cream of the crop. That woman put a fire in me that none of my other teachers did. I have to tell you, Janet Harris was an African-American female. She knew what the situation was. She knew what was at stake. We need all teachers to do that. We need all lawyers to do that. You can't wait until people are just about to, graduate college to tell them, hey, you should consider law school. No, that's way too late. And I need all the lawyers to get involved in that too. Lawyers are some amazing people. They really are. And I'm so glad that when I look out now, when I'm on the bench and I see people of color on a regular basis arguing cases, that to me is incredible. When I started, there were very few. There were the Luby Harpers and, Joe Moniz was there. And I could actually probably name them on two hands, the number of Black lawyers around the entire state of Connecticut. John Rose, who I've met in every single way. John's represented me. John sued me. John's been in front of me. We just have this amazing history together. So, but I'd like to get to that other question you said, what to say to my white peers who want to be helpful.
Yes.
When I sit at a panel like this, my best time is when I learn something. And Senator Winfield said it best. The best way to help me is to get behind me. Get behind me, listen to me. Go back to Mrs. Harris. There's a reason why God put us on this earth with only one mouth, but two ears. You have to listen twice as hard as you talk. So do that. Don't explain me. That's the worst thing you can do. Don't try to explain me and explain what I mean. Listen to me and hear what I'm saying and hear what I mean, and then get behind me.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I have to share that your words resonate so strongly with me in terms of expectations. I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was a little kid. That was going to be my goal in life. I think I was 4 when I decided. The day that the space shuttle blew up, and I know most of you probably remember that, I was sitting in my social studies class, and I grew up that day. And I grew up for a couple of very important reasons. One, I realized I wasn't going to be an astronaut. And 2, I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? And I remember that moment very, very clearly. And my teacher at that time was Mrs. Smith. And Mrs. Smith believed in me. And she said, you can do whatever you want. She says, you might even consider being a lawyer the way you talk. Mrs. Smith was an African-American woman, and she was my mentor. And she believed in me in a way that most people in that building didn't. And she changed my life at a critical moment in my life. So I have to tell you that story really resonated for me. Thank you so much for bringing back that memory. I want to get back to the question of what do we tell our kids? And I would like each of you, as we start to come to the close of our conversation, starting with Representative Porter. We often talk about in communities of color, including those of our Latino families who have mixed race relatives, we talk about the talk. And we talk about the talk that we have with especially our young boys of color, how to act around police, how to act around authority, how to save your life essentially in those situations. I'd like for you to flip the script a little bit, and if you had another story you could tell your young person, and I know, Rep. Porter, you have a son and you have a grandson. If you had another story that you could tell them, what would that story be, Rep. Porter?
Ooh. Well, first, let me say that I also have a daughter and a granddaughter, and I don't want us to lose the women and the girls in this equation that are oftentimes forgot about. And if we're talking about police brutality, many Black women and girls are actually killed away from cameras, away from the public, in their homes. So I just want to hold a space in this moment for them as well. Because I worry the same as when my son leaves the house, as when my daughter leaves the house. And actually, I worry about my daughter more, because she's probably above 25, soaking wet. And I'm afraid that she would be easily made a target and taken advantage of, and even hurt. But the talk that I would like to have, instead of the talk that we have to have, that talk that robs our children of their innocence, is one that would actually help to fortify that innocence and expand on that. And I would tell them about the great and wonderful things that we've done and the great and wonderful things that they can do because they are loved, they are appreciated, they are seen as equal, opportunities are equitable, the sky is the limit. And it's the things that I tell them anyway. But I would like to be able to tell them that, knowing that that is not a hope and a dream, but that is reality. And I think that is the difference between, not the difference between what I say, but the difference between what I hold in my heart and know is true. That there's going to be many obstacles, and I think we've all been told that. I would like to tell the story on the flip side of that, exactly that. There are no obstacles. You have the same opportunities, you have the same resources, you have the same privilege, because you do have the same blood. Our blood is red. You split me, you split someone white, we all bleed the same. When mothers lose children, I believe that we all hurt the same. But I think our hurt never has an opportunity to heal because the wound, the scab, never gets to fall off. If we get an opportunity to gain a scab, it's ripped off. We talk about I can't breathe. Back of my shirt says I can't grieve because we get no reprieve from this. So the story I would tell would be full of joy and possibilities, endless possibilities, without the fear of leaving home and having harm done to you or having opportunities held back from you simply because of the skin you're in.
Thank you. Representative Miller, same question for you.
Sorry. So I would tell them my story, and I tell young people my story all the time because I was a young person who was told, you're not smart enough to take math or Spanish, and I ended up with a degree in mathematics. So I tell young people, don't let anyone define who you are and what you can do. As Representative Porter says, you could do anything you want. The possibilities are there. And I just want to go back to the Stanford Charter School of Excellence. When they approached me and they asked me to support them to bring that school to Stanford from the Bronx, I looked at her and said, no, that is not my fight. I am charter schools. I'm not getting involved in that because the fight is too great for that, right? There were too many people. And it was a heavy fight. And so I read in the newspaper what the residents of this city said. And they said in front of these young people that they had brought down from the Bronx, we don't have those problems here. Go back to the Bronx. And I went down to that school. I said, I have to go. And I went down to that school. And when I saw 4-year-olds learning how to read, I knew that school had to come to the city. And so we fought very hard to get that to the state, in the city. And we fought very hard to get that school here. But again, that school was designed for Black and Brown children to give them the opportunity for success. And so when I speak to them and all students, I tell them, they call them scholars. Yes, you are a scholar. You could be anything. I tell them, I came from public housing. I was exposed to drugs. I was exposed to teenage pregnancy. I was exposed to all of that. And look at me today. But you can't let the obstacles stop you because there will always be obstacles. And as Representative Porter says, we take our children, we take their innocence away. I was thinking about my daughter. I have to apologize to her. I put so much pressure on her, telling her, speak proper English. You can't dress this way. No, you can't get an extra hole. No, you can't get tattoos. No, you can't do this. No, you can't say that. That was a lot of pressure for a child. And I've been telling her that since she started school. And so it's unfortunate that our children, we put so much pressure on our children. They have to deal with school. They have to deal with what's going on in their community. And then they have to learn how to be Black. And that's a lot of pressure. So I would just tell them they could be anything. And I use my life as an example. When people tell you no, you say yes. You let that no empower you to do your best. And if I could say one thing, I have to give Chief Justice his props. I have to say this to you. One of the things that has discouraged me is that we as people of color get into these positions where we can make a difference and we don't. We don't give back. We don't bring young children along so that they could see that they can make it. Because, you know, I always tell people I'm visual, I have to see it. When they see that you've done it, or if they have someone speaking life into them, that empowers them. And so Chief Justice has taken his personal time to mentor children. I see him taking them into the courts. A lot of times our kids go into court when the police takes them into court after they've been arrested, but he's shown them a different avenue into going into the courtroom. And so I want to give you your props, because you have walked, again, you are talking, right? You're walking the talk, right? Because you are showing young kids, look at me. I came from the west side of Stanford, and I'm jealous that you had Ms. Harris. I wish I had her. But thank you so much for bringing up the fact that teachers are very, very important, and having teachers of color who understands the struggles, understand what's expected of you, what's going to happen to you, understanding that and speaking that life into you. But I really did had to commend you, Chief Justice, and I hope I didn't embarrass you, but I appreciate you, because you're going to make a difference in a young Black or brown child's life. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Winfield, I turn to you with the same question. What's the story you want to be able to tell your kids?
Well, I'll tell you the story I do tell my children, because obviously I talk to them about the talk that we have, and I remember standing on the floor of the Senate right after Dylan Roof and talking about how I had explained to my 9-year-old boy about why someone would think he might want to rape somebody when he didn't even know what sex was, right? Because we forget that was part of what this whole thing was about. But what I tell my children is something I think that is important, and it is a story that comes out of our history, that it wasn't only the slave master holding the whip. And, you know, we talked a little bit ago about how you can do anything you want to do. The question is not just can you do it, it's how do you do it? What are you allowed to do when you get into certain positions? And I want them to understand that you can get into a position and allow the position to constrain you. I want them to understand that before you take that position, you should be rooted in certain things so that when you get that position, you're willing to stand up. You know, I spoke about how it was part of the mission to get to the position I currently hold as the judiciary chair. One of the reasons why was so that when this spring, when we were doing the clean slate bill, when the bill that comes forward is not a bill that should be supported, not a bill that should be a bill that's put forward, I can stand there and say, yeah, we don't normally do this, but I'm going to introduce a completely different bill and have that fight in public. One of the reasons why I want to be there is so that in this moment when we're talking about the issues that we're talking about of police violence, and there's a conversation about negotiating Black lives with the same people who never really cared enough to be part of this fight, and we have a conversation about, well, if it's bipartisan, then we'll do it, I can stand up publicly and say, that's wrong, right? Because not everybody's going to do that, because there are consequences for saying those things. The story I tell my children is the story of going back through our history and realizing that throughout our history, we've done amazing things in times when we weren't necessarily scheduled to do those amazing things. But as we've done those amazing things, there have been constraints on some of us that weren't really there. The shackles weren't really there. The chains weren't really there. Some of us didn't even know we were free once we were free. Harriet Tubman had something to say about that. I don't want my children to grow up and get into a position and just be able to say, I'm a Black person in this position. I want them to say that I'm a Black person of a certain character in this position. And I've been taught enough, trained enough, that when I get that position, I will stand up despite whatever it means. So that's the story that I would tell my children and do tell my children.
Thank you, Senator. I want to turn now to Chief Justice Robinson. I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about some of the things that Representative Miller said. Why is mentorship important to you? I think it's related to the question, but really it's about mentorship. Why do you do what you do in terms of mentoring young people?
Because, and I'm going to talk about the young child again, and I'm going to talk about the young Black male in particular. They are taught very early that they can't achieve, and it's in subtle ways. It's when When Joseph gets a C, he gets a pat on the head. When David gets a C, he gets scolded by the teacher. Those little subtle things start making that child feel that they can't succeed. We need to counterbalance that. When I try to make a big effort to, whenever we have young people come into the courtroom, that I go there. And when the kids look at me and I'm introduced as, this is the Chief Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court, you should see what happens to those kids' faces. You can actually tell that they've been taught that they cannot achieve. Even at that young age, they've been taught that they cannot achieve. That's just not acceptable. So if I can go out there and I can show them, hey, look, this is what I did, and this is how I did it. I was very careful picking my friends. I had two amazing parents. I lost my mom in December. My dad died 12 years ago. But I had wonderful parents who really made sure that I kept the right friends. There were certain people were not allowed in the house. I think Representative Billy Miller knows what I'm talking about. But I think that's the point. You really have to engage early. And then for the older folks, for the people just graduating from law school, it's important to get to them, because then I can tell them that what my path was. And my path was a little harder than theirs, because when I became a member of the Connecticut Bar, there weren't many people that looked like me. There weren't people willing to hire me. And I keep hearing this nonsense about, hey, slavery is over. How come blacks don't achieve? And quite frankly, you're forgetting about 200 years of slavery, 150 years of Jim Crow. The end of that whole era was about 40 years long, 40 to 50 years long. There's a book that I've read that's fantastic. It's called The Color of Law, which talks about how the United States government explicitly, not implicitly, explicitly discriminated. If you were building a housing project and your housing project included blacks and whites, you could not get that loan. If you were looking for a farming loan and you were black, you could not get that loan. My grandfather had a 100-acre farm. There was no way he could have gotten a farming loan. These things happened explicitly up until recent time. My great-grandfather, was the first person born in the Robinson family of free man. Now think about that. That man held me in his arms. So don't tell me that slavery was a long time ago and you people should have achieved. We achieved in spite of that. So we need to get real. Those folks who have been disconnected need to get reconnected. We were talking about what our white peers can do to help us. Quite frankly, our black peers need to get engaged too, quite a few of them, and start doing instead of talking. Little things. Go out there and mentor a child, mentor an adult, mentor someone. Go out there and participate in programs. For me, come to the court, help us achieve what we need to achieve, which is equal justice to all, because people don't trust the system. If people don't believe in the system doesn't work. And there's plenty of reason out there to not trust it, and plenty of reasons to not believe in it. So I know I've been going on. I'm sorry, but I think that this is just a small part of what people can do.
Thank you, Chief Justice. In honor of your time and just to simmer on everything that we've discussed tonight, I think we're coming to a close, but I really do want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you. And I'm going to let you close this, but before you do, I want to thank each and every one of you for your leadership, for your guidance, for your mentorship. And I can tell you that with every fiber of my being, as the executive director of this commission, I am ready to stand behind you and support your leadership in this critical moment for all of us in the state of Connecticut and beyond. So I want to thank you. I want to leave the floor to you for any final thoughts, starting with Representative Porter.
You did say Porter, right? I think it's all been said. I am talked out, Stephen, and I say that just to say it's time to get some things done. I am in a doing mode, and I am ready, able, and willing to get it done. If it means getting it done with just a few or many, that would be my last thought that I want to leave. It's all or nothing. We can no longer wait. Enough is enough. Time is up. Taking back my stuff. All kind of things I've been saying the last few days, but I want people to know that I'm being sincere. I want it to be heartfelt because I mean it, and I plan to prove it. And I hope that not just the folks, my colleagues on this panel, many others, including the ones that have been on the wrong side of this issue. My prayer to you all is that this time, this year, 2020, you will not be on the wrong side of history. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Stephen. I would just say that in this moment, this isn't just about the issue of police accountability. That's a symptom of a much deeper problem that goes to the foundation of this nation. And if you want to be on the right side, it's not as simple as voting the right way or saying you want police accountability in this moment or saying that Black Lives Matter. It's about taking a look at those poison institutions that I talked about earlier and figuring out what do we do about those very institutions that from their foundation are poisoned by the fact that they grow up out of a ruined soil. And that's a hard, I want us to not act like that's an easy thing to do, right? This takes people re-examining everything that they have believed for their whole lives. So it's not easy work, but it is the work. And if you're not willing to do that, then you should put down that shirt and stop standing there with the shirt that says, I can't breathe or Black Lives Matter, because that's not real. The real work is the work of breaking up these institutions, creating new institutions, creating new ways of being. Yes, I'm tired, but I've never given up on the work. But I'm hoping that my children aren't doing the same work I'm doing. I know there's plenty of work for them to do. This work is not the work they should be doing. So, Stephen, thank you and the commission for helping to engage in these conversations, these deep conversations. And I just want everybody who watches these to know that there's a reason for these conversations. And it's because if you don't have these frank conversations that I've heard from some people, by the way, on some of the things I've said on some of these conversations, but they're necessary because if they're not said, then you can stay asleep. And there's no time for people to continue to sleep right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Miller.
I remember driving home a few years ago and just saying, God, I'm tired of this fight. I'm tired of fighting the same fight. You know, we see the young people today and we say, oh, the young people are out there and they're the ones that are going to make the change. Well, you know, I was young once. I was marching once. And so it is still young people. And so the only thing that I could say is let's get it done. And as Senator Winfield said, it's not going to be easy. And there are going to be hard conversations. There are going to be things that we're going to say that's going to hurt people and it's going to be very sensitive. So, but it's things that have to be done. You can't, as they say, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. And so we're going to have to acknowledge that it's broken. And we have to build new systems because as Representative Porter said, that this stuff is deeply rooted. And these systems are deeply rooted. And I've been saying that for years. We need to cut the root. Cut it. Let's cut the root and let's start over. Because we do have allies in our caucus. And I want to thank them. And I have to say that we had a member apologize to the Black and Puerto Rican caucus. And that's, and you know, what some of my colleagues said is that, okay, thank you for the apology, but what are you going to do to help us? And so that's what we're saying. Stand behind us, help us. Don't fight us on what we think is best, what we know is best for our community. And so I want, again, Steve, I want to thank you because this was not an easy conversation to have today. And so, well, it was for us, but it wasn't easy for individuals to hear this conversation. And these are the kind of conversations that we have to have. The naked truth, raw. Sorry, don't mean to hurt anyone's feelings, but this is what we have to do. People have to understand what Black people have been gone through for centuries and the pain that's there. That there's pain behind the conversations that we have. So again, thank you. And I appreciate all the panelists. Thank you for allowing me to share this forum with you.
Thank you. Chief Justice, the last word is for you.
First, I do this very sincerely. I want to thank the other panelists for what they told me during my nomination process. Each one of them said they would hold me accountable in being Chief Justice. And I hear your words especially loudly lately. And I appreciate that. And I think that's one thing that people need to do. We need to hold others accountable. We need to hold ourselves accountable. And you need to reject racism and racial injustice, not just during convenient times when you're around me, but those inconvenient times when you're home, when you're talking to your relatives who are saying some things that you know are wrong and you just shut up and don't say anything. I know that is happening because I've heard people tell me, yeah, you know, my dad's racist, my mom's racist, my uncle's racist. So what have you done to keep them in check? What have you done to explain why that's wrong? Well, you know, I don't want to cause an argument. It's like, you know what? You ask them what you can do, you can at least do that. The other thing is actions speak louder than words. It's an old saw, but it's absolutely true. I talk sometimes in my presentations about when I was working on a speech for Martin Luther King's birthday, and this actually happened. I was driving home from work, and there was a song on by Tevin Campbell. Tevin Campbell was one of Prince's artists, a young guy. I think he started like he was 12 or 13, and he sang this song, and some of the words were, nothing comes from talking but sound. We can talk all we want to, but the world goes round and around. So it's like, talk only gets you so far. Action is what really moves you. So I'm saying, get off your butt, get uncomfortable, because this is uncomfortable. This is hard stuff. And if you are going to have your feelings hurt and you're going to walk away, I didn't need you there in the first place. But, you know, have those conversations. Thank you.
Thank each of you, and good night.